Our universe seems to be defined by a set of numbers which in some sense look special. If we had different numbers, we would end up with a sterile universe. People react to this seeming coincidence in a number of ways. You could say it's the outcome of some kind of design or providence. We could say it's a brute fact we have to accept, because these numbers might be determined by some theory which we haven't yet discovered.
For a while it was possible to believe that the laws of nature were not so precisely set as to require the hand of a creator. But then a completely new fundamental property of the universe was discovered. An anti-gravity force present in space itself. It is called the cosmological constant, and when cosmologists calculated its effect on the evolution of the universe, they realized it had to be very finely tuned indeed.
The fine-tunings, how fine-tuned are they? Most of them are 1% sort of things. In other words, if a thing is 1% different, everything is bad. And a physicist could say, maybe those are just luck. On the other hand, this cosmological constant is tuned to 1 part and 10 to the 120, 120 decimal places. Nobody thinks that's accidental. That is not a reasonable idea, that something is tuned to 120 decimal places just by accident. That's the most extreme example of fine-tuning.
No force in the history of cosmology has ever been discovered to be that finely tuned. The cosmological constant needs to be set to 1 part in a trillion, 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 trillion. Otherwise the universe would be so drastically different that it would be impossible for us to evolve. That the cosmological constant arrived at such a tiny value by chance seemed to be out of the question, but the alternative explanation was also impossible to contemplate.
Physicists did not want to accept the idea that the laws of nature might be controlled by well, the benevolence of nature. There should be no reason why the luck should just have it that we can exist. It's too much, it's a stretch, it's much too far to stretch.
It seemed that hidden in the laws of nature was a value so precise that it was impossible to deny that our universe was designed. But a designed universe requires the existence of a designer, a notion that even the anthropic scientists did not want to entertain. It seemed that hidden in the laws of nature was a value so precise that it was impossible to deny that our universe was designed. But a designed universe requires the existence of a designer. The scientists were between a rock and a hard place. Their own discoveries were pointing them towards an intelligent designer.
Physicists' dislike of mixing religion into physics. I think they were somewhat afraid that if it was admitted that the reason the world is the way it is has to do with our own existence, that could be hijacked by the creationists, by the intelligent designers.
There are physicists who will tell you that if you take about half a dozen physical constants, these are constants that physicists have no explanation for, they just accept that these numbers have the values that they do, and they then do theoretical calculations using their models to say if any one of these half-dozen constants was ever so slightly varied, then the universe as we know it would not be possible. For example, if the gravitational constant was a little bit different, there would be no stars, there would be no galaxies, the entire universe would just be a uniform splurge of hydrogen, for example. You wouldn't have stars, you wouldn't have chemistry, you wouldn't have the formation of the heavier elements, you couldn't have life. And they do the same trick for half a dozen other physical constants. A good example is Martin Rees, the present Astronomer Royal, in his book Just Six Numbers. If the universe, if the constants of the universe are indeed fine-tuned, how do we explain it? How do we explain the appearance that the universe is tuned to bring us into existence? Well, theists say God did it. God twiddled the knobs and tuned the physical constants to have exactly the right values. That, of course, is no explanation at all, because it leaves unexplained the tuner. It's just pushing the problem back one step. So we can instantly discount explanation number one. Explanation number two is adopted by physicists, I think Steven Weinberg, who was quoted earlier in this conference. Steven Weinberg, Nobel Prize-winning physicist from Texas, I think his view is that we don't yet understand enough physics, and when we do, when we have the longed-for theory of everything, the TOE, we will then realize that these knobs are not for tuning. There is no freedom, there are no degrees of freedom. There's only one way for a universe to be. Having accepted the word of physicists that there is an element of fine-tuning, and I've tried to lay out three possible explanations. One would be God, which, as I've said, isn't an explanation at all. One would be the multiverse, and then anthropically, with hindsight, saying we have to be sitting in one of the universes that could give us. But the third one, which I've attributed to you, possibly wrongly, would be what I call the macho physicists, who say, well, it's just that we don't understand why these things are the other way they are. One day we will, when we have a theory of everything, it will be understood. But it sounds from our conversation as though that I misrepresented you there.
I don't think one should underestimate the fix we're in, that in the end we will not be able to explain the world, that we will have some set of laws of nature. We will not be able to derive them on the grounds simply of mathematical consistency, because we can already think of mathematically consistent laws that don't describe the world as we know it. And we will always be left with a question, why are the laws of nature what they are rather than some other laws? And I don't see any way out of that. The fact that the constants of nature are suitable for life, which is clearly true, we observe.
The final idea, which I think probably most physicists at least have some time for, is the multiverse theory.
No one has constructed a theory in which that's true. I mean, it's not only a speculation. The theory would be speculative, but we don't have a theory in which that speculation is mathematically realized.
Yeah.
So, but it's a possibility.
And the fact that the cancellation is so precise means that the number of universes in the multiverse you need to postulate in order to anthropically
be comfortable with it is very, very large.
And it must be at least 10 to the 56, or in fact,
exactly, yeah.
If you think you have some idea about fluctuations at even shorter distances, I think you would say at least 10 to the 120. In fact, that's a little disturbing,